Hi, in this video I will show you how to create procedural snow and icicles with Blender geometry nodes. So let's start by delete everything except the default cube and switch to the geometry nodes tab. And for the base mesh I want to create a simple text object. So string to curve, and here I type something snow, and I'd like to center everything, and then we fill the curve and extrude it. I want to choose individual, so the individual faces don't get extruded, so we don't have geometry in here. And the next thing I'll do is I'll rotate it, so transform and rotate along the x-axis. And also we need to realize it, so realize instances. And this is kind of like the apply transform we do in the 3D view here. And then we call this our base mesh. And we can replace it with any other mesh. But for now we work with this, and to create snow I simply distribute points on this. So distribute points, and I increase the density. I want to display both, so join geometry. Maybe we switch this to matcap. I prefer this one. And yeah, so we only want 2 instance points at the top of the mesh, and the way we can do this is the dot product. So let me quickly create a dot product. And the idea here is to compare the normal vector of the mesh with another normal vector which points in the up direction. So let me quickly show you what I mean. Here we have a sphere object with the normals facing outward, and when we take, for example, another vector which points in the up direction, the dot product between the normal here at the top, where it's always also pointing upwards, returns 1, because both are oriented in the same direction. And if the normals are oriented 90 degrees to the upwards vector, the dot product returns 0, and if it is pointed downwards like this, it returns -1. So for a vector like this, it may return -0.5, and for a vector like this, it may return +0.5. So that's the idea of the dot product. And let me quickly delete these annotations. So yeah, oops, I can get the normals of this object, and to create a vector which point upwards, I simply need to put 1 at the z-axis, and then I want to compare this result. So compare, and if it's greater than 0, we want to distribute these points. So here you can see they are only distributed at the top, and this we can do to create the snow. And we do this by converting the points to a volume. And of course we need to decrease the radius, but I'll do the fine tuning later. And then we convert the volume to mesh. And here you can see that we have a really simple snow setup. So it's important to keep the density of the distribute points on faces kind of high. And I'd also like to increase the voxel amount a little bit. And maybe even lower for the radius. We need to compensate this by increasing the amount even more. And yeah, right now it looks really jaggy, so we shade it smooth. And to give it more random offset, we can offset the points in the Z direction based on a random float. So set position. We need to access the Z axis, so combine X, Y, Z. And here we can plug in a random value. So random value. And of course, we don't want it to be this extreme. We only want a small amount. Maybe 0.2 looks okay to me. And we also can randomize the radius here a little bit. So duplicate the random value node. And I want it to vary between, let's say, 0.03 and 0.05. So let's have a look. Okay, that also looks okay, I guess. And yeah, that's the first step we need to do to create a snow. Let's call this snow. And right now you see that the snow gets instanced where it normally wouldn't, because here in the O the area is occluded and normally no snow would lay here. And to prevent this from happening, we can simply do a raycast which checks if there is any mesh above our points that we've instanced. So let me quickly make a little space for this, because it needs to happen after our distribute points on faces. And I need a raycast. And the target geometry is also our text object. So let me quickly organize this a little bit. And the vector of the ray needs to be oriented in the upwards direction. So +1 on the z-axis. And then we can simply delete all the points on which is hit is true. And right now you can see that the raycast method works really nicely. So let me say if we rotate, for example, our mesh a little bit around its axis, you can see that the snow starts to appear here. And yeah, so you've seen that the mesh is hollow on the backside, but I don't care for it right now. Yeah, so let's remove this rotation again and put it at 90 degrees. So The next thing, or maybe let's talk about this value here again, because with this I can control kind of like a threshold at which angle the snow should appear. So you can see what happens here. And what also is important, let me visualize this quickly by connecting this here and disconnect this. You can see that these points are placed exactly at the mesh. So this can cause some problems with the raycast. So let me show it to you. You can see that the delete geometry node deletes also points which shouldn't be deleted because they are at the top, and this happens because they are intersected with the mesh, and the raycast in some cases detects a hit because they are exactly at the same position. And to prevent this from happening, I can simply displace our points along its z-axis with a slight amount. So after our distribute points on faces, I offset it a really tiny amount, let's say 0.0001, and this should work. Okay, on this angle you can see it happen. So maybe 0.001, and this, yeah, this is okay, I guess. And now the result should look even nicer. Yeah. So let me quickly test this again. And you see the surface is way smoother than before. Before it was kind of blotchy. Oh. Without set position, with set position. Yeah, pretty obvious. Okay, so the next step I want to do is to create some icicles, and I also do this procedurally. So first we create a single icicle. I do this with a curved line, and I want it to be oriented downwards like this. Then I do curve to mesh with a circle as the profile curve, and I can live with a relatively low resolution here. And then I use a set radius in combination with the spline parameter, where I can access the factor of the curve. And the factor goes from 0 to 1, like you can see here. And to control it a little bit better, I can multiply it with a value. For example, here I can kind of control the radius, but because of course I need to invert it, so subtract it from 1, and yeah, that's a really simple icicle. Maybe the radius need to be a little bit lower, like this. Now I call this icicle. And I want to instance this icicle on my snow. So I distribute some points on the snow. And on these points, I instance my icicles. So instance on points. I take this, and you can see that these icicles start to appear. Right now they are really big, and right here I can scale them down. And we also can do this randomly. So take a random value node. I can leave it at float because I want scaling happen uniformly. And let's say the smallest should be 0.1 and the longest should be 0.6. And yeah, this looks okay, but there's a little problem. Like right here, we don't want these icicles to appear where a mesh is below our snow. So a simple way to do this is to check if there is a mesh below our points we use to instance our icicles. And we can do this with another raycast node. So let's create a raycast. And we want to check the base mesh. So I create a reroute here and take this as the target. And the ray direction needs to be -1 in the z direction, so we can leave it at its default. And here we say if the raycast hits our mesh, we want to delete the points. So delete geometry and take the ICID as an input. So now you can see that only icicles appear where it is possible. So for example, if I rotate this a little bit more in this direction, you can see that these icicles appear here. It isn't beautiful right now, but we'll take care of it later. So right now I'm happy with the result, and maybe we can increase the amount of icicles a little bit with the density value here. And yeah, that's okay, I guess. What I don't like so far is that the top of our icicles is hollow, and we can resolve this by fill our caps, but it still doesn't look really nice. And what I like to do is to instance a little bit of snow at the top here and blend it with our base snow setup. So let's do this quickly. And the simple idea here is to take these points where I instance my icicles, combine them with the points I used to make my snow off, and then I create the volume out of these 2 point clouds, and then I have kind of like a merged mesh of the two. So I take a join geometry. Let's organize this a little bit. Here I have the icicle point cloud, and here I have the snow point cloud. This is both combined, and we don't actually want this in our snow frame anymore because we only needed to instance our points for the icicles, but we can copy this points to volume and volume to mesh and use it after our join geometry node. So the layout of my nodes is a little bit messed up. I hope you can follow it. So here you can see the result. Right now it isn't really pretty, but we take care of it in a moment. And I don't want this connection anymore. So it's like this and like this. And I'll steal the shade smooth from here. I don't need it at this position right now. So let's quickly name this Icicle point cloud, and this we call snow point cloud, and this we call snow mesh. And you can see that we don't have this open icicles here at the top, but it also looks kind of weird because the scale is kind of big and it looks like a snowball. I don't want it to be this way. So a way to do this is to set a different radius for our bottom point cloud, so the icicle point cloud, but we only can control it here. So we need to capture an attribute, a float for both point clouds. So let's say here I want it to be 1, for example, and at the bottom I want it to be 0.5, and then I can add these both together. And multiply them with our random value we have here. And I hope this goes well. I haven't tested it. So yeah, here I can control the amount of the icicle snow. And here I can control the amount of the top snow. So yeah, looks kind of nice, but in some cases we have these icicles poke through our mesh. So maybe let's displace them a little bit on the z-axis. So set position and slightly displace them only a little bit, 0.1, and it still pokes through. So let's have a look what we can do. Maybe we can increase the resolution of our point cloud. Or maybe the threshold, decrease it a little bit. Yeah. Oh, I have another idea. Maybe we can offset the whole setup of our icicles with the snow on top. So it should work if we offset it after our points we've distributed. So set position, and here, yeah, you can see really nicely these icicles with the little snowball at the top. Looks kind of cute, but we want them to be connected to the point cloud of the snow. So yeah, it's a little bit of fine tuning, and right now it looks okay. We don't have icicles poke through our mesh, and if we rotate our mesh, let's hope that everything works. Yeah, looks good. Or maybe do another word. Yeah, works. That's nice. So yeah, all we have to do now is to create some materials, and then we've done. So let's switch to the shading tab, and here I want to change to viewport shading, and first thing I do is I create a world background, and I keep it really simple. Use a noise texture for the color, and I decrease the scale quite strong. Then I increase the contrast with the color ramp. And Control T creates a mapping node and a texture coordinate node. And here I can choose a lighting setup that I like. So yeah, I like it this way. And I only want the noise texture to have influence on the lighting and the reflections. I don't want it to be rendered straight to the camera. So I create another color with an RGB node. Then I create a mix RGB node, mix these two together, and for the factor I use the light path node is camera ray. And now only the bottom color gets rendered to the camera. I can choose maybe a bluish tint here. And yes, that's a really simple world background. Now to the object. We want to create 3 materials. One for the text, one for the snow, and one for the icicle. This isn't a shading tutorial, by the way. I keep these shaders really simple. So maybe a more advanced ice or snow shader is in the future, but this tutorial we keep it really simple. So for the text I choose maybe a blue color, and we also need to apply these materials in our geometry nodes. So back in here we need to add set material nodes. Here is our text object. Then comes our snow, and here we have our icicles. Then back to the shading tab. You can see that the material is applied. So for the snow I choose a subsurface shader with a uniform radius and maybe a little bluish tint. And let's also quickly create like a little sparkling effect with a Voronoi texture. And we want a color output. Right now it is stretched because it uses the automatically generated texture coordinates, but we want to use the object coordinates, which in most cases work pretty well, especially with geometry nodes. So like this. Then we increase it to a really high amount. And then we can simply plug this straight into our normal. It's a really cheap trick, so it's not an advanced snow shader, but it should get the job done. And now if we add, for example, a light sun texture, sunlight, and let it shine from the back, and increase the value a little bit, you can see the sparkling effect. Now we can, for example, take a normal map node and control the strength, and also we can adjust some values here, so to make it look more icy like this. We can decrease the roughness and maybe increase the specularity. And yeah, that should be enough for a really simple snow material. Next, we do the icicle material. And for this, I also keep it simple. So just a bluish material with a low roughness, and that should be it for this tutorial. So let's go back in our geometry node setup, and now we can play a little bit with the settings. So here we can type another words like drips, and we can rotate the mesh like this, and let's say we want the offset to be more extreme. Can do this right here. And also I can increase where we at. I want to do this here. I want to increase the resolution, or I want to decrease it a little bit. Or I can play with the threshold to make like this melting effect. And the icicle point cloud, I can increase the icicle amount to extreme values like this. Or I can even change my icicles because they are also procedural. I can change the length here. Yeah, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you've liked it, and see you next time.